everyone, and welcome to our next edition of Meet the Creator for October 2024. And this is our picture book edition. Now, this is a little bit different to our usual picture books that we show, because today I'm going to be talking to Mike Rampton about his non-fiction amazing book, There's No Such Thing as a Silly Question. And there it is. There we go. Which is the most stunning book, I have to tell you, but also absolutely fascinating. Mike, are you happy to start us off with reading us a couple of the questions from the book, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put it right here. We'll start off with, did dinosaurs sneeze? Yes, dinosaurs did get colds just like us. One particular fossil, an 18-metre sauropod preserved for 150 million years and nicknamed Dolly, has taught scientists a lot about dinosaurs and respiratory illness. Even the biggest, most awesome creatures to ever walk the planet sometimes got a sore throat and a cough. And if by sneeze you meant fart, it's still a yes. Some scientists believe the huge amounts of methane produced by giant sauropods parping away may have contributed to prehistoric global warming. Dinosaur farts, a blast from the past. And what we got? Oh, it's different. Can I live on one food forever and ever? You could try, but there's a reason doctors always recommend a balanced diet. Your body needs a variety of vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients to survive. If you are absolutely determined to pick one food and stick with it, you could do worse than potatoes. If you ate both white potatoes and sweet potatoes, you'd get all the vitamins and amino acids you needed. However, to get enough protein and calcium, you'd need to eat about 84 white potatoes a day. This would bring its own problems. You'd only ever stop eating for long enough to shout, "Ow, my tummy hurts," or run to the toilet. There's 211 more of those in there.
Perfect choice. I should think most kids would be absolutely fascinated by farting dinosaurs. I would think that would be one of their favourite facts. So there are, as you say, 213 questions answered in the book. How on earth did you decide what to include?
So 213 is a lot. It's one of those odd numbers where you can get... So the reason it's 213 is that's the most bones anyone has in their body. Some people have less, or fewer rather. 213 is the maximum amount of bones that anyone will have in their body. It's one of those things where you can get the first 40 really quickly and you go, wow, we've got 40 in a heartbeat. 213, that'll be an absolute doddle. And it's loads. 213 is loads and loads. But it's almost deciding what not to include was almost tougher than deciding what to include, because the plan was always to because this was published by Nosy Crow with the University of Cambridge. The plan was always to translate it, and in fact I've got the Bulgarian version to hand.
Oh,
wow. Which was quite exciting to get in the post. But because that was always going to be something that we were going to try and do, certain questions didn't sort of make it. So there were anything to do with words, really, homonyms, or like questions where the question itself relied on sort of wordplay, or why knight, like the person in armor, is the same word as night, the opposite day. That doesn't make any sense if you translate it into Dutch, where they're completely different, same words. So there were things that were excluded for those types of reasons, or for just being so British that it wouldn't make sense to anyone else. And then it was just what, just keep going and going and going. So there were questions that came from my daughter. The whole thing began with my daughter asking me a question that I didn't know the answer to, and then I looked it up and I liked the answer, and sort of thought, well, I'd never have learned that if she hadn't asked me it. There must be something to this. So the ones that came from her, ones that came from other kids I know, friends, children, my child's friends. Some that came from the team at Nosy Crow that were working on it, all sorts. And then there's things where you see like the illustrator Guillermo Carston, his pictures are so good that, you know, we did it in batches, and the first batch comes in and there's a question about a dog, and his pictures of dogs are so good that you think, wow, I want to ask more questions about dogs because I want to see more of his dogs. There's one question in it, which is, I think, why are there so many types of dog? And that is there at least partially so that we could get him to draw like 25 different types of dog on one page because he's so good at them. So, sorry to cut a very, very long answer short, all over the place.
That's absolutely fine. And obviously there must have been a heck of a lot of research involved, but as you've just mentioned, I know you had some help with the fact checking, so you were working with the university, weren't you, for that?
Yeah, so that the way that worked was everything after I'd written it was sent off to various kind of subject-specific experts at the University of Cambridge. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't so much the like early research; it was checking it after I'd written it. I think just because of the timings of how this arrangement took place and things like that. So there was quite a bit that had to be kind of rewritten or rethought after. There were some things that I completely misunderstood the science of, so that was really helpful. Occasionally they would just feedback like, yeah, this is all fine, but it's not very funny. I thought it'd be funnier. And things like that, which was great, which was a criticism I took, you know, really well.
As we all do.
As we all do. But yeah, it's really cool. Like it's obviously, you know, the University of Cambridge. It's you know, a fairly big deal. So the people who were there, who, you know, read it before anyone else did, were like, you know, intimidatingly impressive, you know, international experts, which was kind of odd. And odd, you know, where you're like, oh, just I've written this on my dining table, and now, you know, like it's going to be checked by like a world-class leading astrophysicist. You know, oh no. But it's yeah, it makes it, I think it makes it like quite a unique sort of thing in the end. Like it's this mixture of like silly and really, really meticulously fact-checked and fun. And yeah, no, it's super cool. Like far. Like there's something quite nice about absolutely knowing that you are the least intelligent person involved in a project, rather than just like suspecting it. There's actually like empirical proof.
It's quite freeing, I would think.
It is freeing, yeah. It's,
so,
yeah,
what was the favourite fact that you found out, or what was the most surprising fact you learned? And I have to say, if I can give you an example, the fact I liked most, only because it helps me in a problem I'm having, was why do we have blue for boys and pink for girls? And of course the short answer is we don't, but there you go. You'll have to read the book, everyone, to find out why. But I found that really interesting. So what was one thing that you thought was most surprising for you?
Something that it's probably better known than I was aware of, but it completely caught me by surprise, was how many animals have 3 eyes or 5 eyes, which I had no idea. I knew spiders had 8, and I thought everything else had 2, and that was kind of it. But there's a thing called a parietal eye, which is a lot of lizards and like lizards and sort of reptiles and other things have this kind of eye. It's covered in a layer of skin, and it doesn't see as well as the other two eyes, but it can detect differences in light. So it's to do with, I think, regulating their body clock and kind of telling them when it's time to wake up, when daylight arrives and things like that. And quite a lot of insects have 5. So they've got one that does that, and then these other ones that do various things. I think some of it's to do with flight and navigating flight stuff. But I assumed, I certainly assumed if anything had more than 2 eyes, that they'd at least come in pairs. It'd be even numbers.
Yes.
Like 3 eyes caught me completely by surprise. So I had no idea about that. And the very first one that I did, the one that started it all off, was about my daughter asked me if spiders ever run out of web. And I'd never thought about that before. And it turns out that they do, because it's finite, everything's finite. But they'll often eat a web that they have made if it's not been very good at catching anything, or they want to spin a web elsewhere. If they're low on food, they'll eat their web to reuse the protein. And I didn't expect that when I was looking it up. Certainly didn't expect that.
You see, as an arachnophobe, I'd be quite happy if they ran out of web, to be fair.
There's quite a few spiders in the book, actually.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Because often, again, with 213 being a lot, you're on one subject and you find out something and it naturally just leads us.
Yeah.
You're not learning anything in isolation. You're learning, like, reading an enormous amount about spiders, and you also start thinking about this and start thinking about this and start thinking about this. So there's at one point early on in the book, I was really leading a spider-focused life for a few days, and researching it all on, of course, the web.
Boom tish. There we go. Well, you've actually already answered my next question, but I do want to just mention Gilham Carton's illustrations again, because they're just stunning, aren't they? Absolutely stunning. So I'm guessing your reaction to seeing them for the first time was the same awe that I had when I was looking at the book.
Oh, they're so good. They're like, I'd seen some of his stuff before when they first said that he was going to be working on it, and so I knew it's going to be good. So I was excited about seeing it. But what he actually did is it's so lovely. And he had a really massive challenge, I think, because it's so kind of friendly and cartoony, but there's also places where it's very accurate.
Yeah.
And so sort of balancing those two, I think he's just done an incredible job on, along with so the main person that was working with him was the designer Holly Phillips, who also, I think, did such an incredible job, like the way that the text all works and the way that they worked together to come up with how on some of the spreads, you've got like 4 questions and it's 4 separate things, but all interacting with each other in a really clever way. Yeah, no, it's lovely. Like I saw it as black and white kind of outliney sketches first, and then like seeing it come together, every kind of iteration of it just got more exciting and more detailed, and it's so good. There's one in it of a knight in armor that really needs to go to the toilet. That is it's up there with anything that's in the Louvre, I reckon.
That sounds absolutely amazing. So, and funny you say about the design, because the design of the book to me really reminded me of Guinness World Records, in that you can dip in and out of it, and it's very easy to dip in and out of it. And when I was a school librarian, Guinness World Records is just elite in a school library. Believe me, you've got to have it because the kids just love it. So were you a fact book lover when you were younger, or are you more fiction based?
Anything and everything, really. Yeah, I read huge amounts of fiction, but I also had a lot of books that worked in this kind of way that dip in and out. So one's the Guinness Book of Records. We had a book called The Chronicle of the World, which was an enormous hardback thing. Like, it would outweigh my daughter probably. But just a lot of these like non-linear non-fiction books where you just open it up at random and take something in. And they're great because you can be there for 2 minutes, you can be there for hours on end, dipping in and out. There were some really good, like, kind of mono ones as well, like, that weren't sort of big and colourful. And I had a book called The World Almanac that was really good. There was a book called The Early Times Book of Unsolved Mysteries that was like that as well. You just open it up and it just works really well as this kind of like these snippets of information. And they were great because you can't, like, I was a very, very keen, enthusiastic reader, but like even people that aren't that into reading, I feel like read the Guinness Book or picked up the Guinness Book of Records. And if you've got no interest in reading whatsoever, you open it up and there's something about like the man who ate an aeroplane. You're like, well, yeah, I'm reading.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Of course I'm reading about a man who ate an aeroplane.
Well, of course. Well, I have to say, I think, this would be a book that, yes, of course, would be very popular in the school library. But we are also coming up to that time of year when people are just starting to think about that C word. And I have to say that I think this would make a fantastic gift. It's a wonderful gift book. It's something that I think any young person would be overjoyed to open on Christmas morning. So if you want to get a start on your Christmas shopping, guys, I'd definitely go for this one. Thanks ever so much for coming to talk to us today, Mike. And congratulations on the book, because I just love it.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our middle grade edition of Meet the Creator for October 2024. And I'm very happy today to be interviewing the author of The River Thief, Hannah Peck. And I loved this book and I'm really excited to tell you more about it. So welcome, Hannah.
Hello, thanks Bev, thank you for having me. Lovely to be on the SLA.
Would you mind giving us a little bit of a reading to start us off, please?
Yes, absolutely. I've decided to read from the beginning of The River Thief, just so that I can familiarise everyone and not just dive straight into the middle. So I will start and get going. I am used to a deep cold that keeps me moving, to searching the gauze of slow shifting sea for a tiny blot, the belly of a ship, a whale, to sleeping suspended in salt clouds. There is no sleep or salt in these mellow, fly-swarmed shallows. I follow the beckoning finger against the current, which flows through the slits in my neck, gills. I swim over rusted arrowheads and half-buried swords. These people forget things easily, carelessly, but the waters and those who live in them cannot. Chapter 1. On the bank of the River Lyde, a girl was crouched between the reeds with a long stick gripped in her hands. The end was whittled to a sharp point with which she tracked the slow-moving water. A one-eyed cat watched from a shady spot, lazily flipping its tail. Although just past dawn, a pale and thirsty sun had snatched up any dew that might have settled into the grass and drawn a mist curling up from the earth. It was rumoured the rain was afraid to fall. There had barely been time for spring before summer had come and scorched any whisper of green to a greying yellow. Hadley Bede was not ugly, but nor was she pretty. In fact, her face was not decidedly anything which, when the sun was high and her tasks for the day were completed, she could chalk up to her defiant refusal to be categorised. Other times, when she was sad or had nothing to say, her flat features, forgettable nose, and pale skin seemed a failure on her body's part, evidence of some listlessness or stagnancy she feared lived deep within her. Her hair was the colour of wet sand and hung down her back, and her mouth was wide. This morning she wore a coarse shift dress that fell, tent-like, over her small frame, a hand-me-down from her sister Celia, who had managed to keep it white while it was hers. Now the dress was yellowing, with grass stains and mud. But Adelie hardly registered the state of her clothes. Instead, her face was crumpled in steady concentration. "I'm going to catch it this time, Calx," she said grimly, lining up the end of the stick with a bundle of weeds floating down the shallow stream. "The smell shall not be returning to the mill any time soon." The cat yawned. "You'll soon be thanking me," Adelie muttered, readying herself to strike as the strange shape neared, passing under a slick of starwort. She followed the point where she thought it might resurface with the tip of her stick. She would need to be exact about this one, she thought, leaning further to the left. Her foot slipped an inch down the bank, but she steadied herself, one arm shielding her eyes from the low sun and clusters of mayflies. A few feet away, the water quickened and thinned, and if it passed by her long stick, the something would drop down a small but steep weir and under the surface of the mill pond, where it might lodge in the 12-foot wooden wheel that ran the watermill. After that, one of three things might happen. One possibility was that something would prove to be a nothing and simply get squashed by the wheel. Judging by how big it was, Adelie thought this unlikely. The second thing that might happen was that the something would get caught in the old wheel, causing its paddles to scrape to a stop, jamming the network of metal rods and cogs behind it, and causing the millstone, where Adelie's family would be grinding flour, to stop spinning. The very worst of these three things, however, was the smell. The smell was of rot and decay and never arrived immediately, but crept up through the beams of the watermill and into the flour sacks over a few days until everything stank. This meant nights spent worrying about whether you were really smelling the smell or only thinking you were smelling the smell. The smell had only happened once this year, and Adelie was not about to let it happen again. With one jab, she speared the something with her stick and hauled the dripping mass onto the bank, shouting with delight and stopping only when Calx began to wind himself about her bare legs. "Look who's interested now," she says with a smile, scratching between his pink ears. "Now we successfully avoided the smell, we can turn our attention to the best part, deciding what this is." The something was lumpy, a mess of pondweed and tape grass, but through the gaps were flashes of amber. Adelie began to break the weeds apart with her hands until the thing inside was exposed. It was an eel, about the size of her forearm. There was a large cut down its side, the flesh white and curiously bloodless. This was exciting. She'd only ever seen eels on the odd market day when they were brought from London, but even then they weren't fresh like this.
Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I always hate stopping authors reading because we all love to hear you read your own words to us, but unfortunately I think I've got to ask you a couple of questions. So the book reads very much like a classic legend. So is it based on any actual legends? And are you yourself keen on reading myths and legends? And is that what influenced it?
Ooh, yes, two questions in one there. So yes, in order to answer the first question, it is based on a folklore tale near from where I grew up, which is in Hampshire, near Winchester. So there's actually there is a town called Nately Skers. It does exist, which is the town that Adelie is from. In fact, all the locations in the River Thief, I think apart from two, are historically accurate. And Nately Skers has a church which you can go and visit now. It's still there. It's a really, really old Norman church. It's quite tiny, actually. And on the front, under the kind of entrance archway, there is an amazing carving of a mermaid, which is just really fascinating, right? Because you think, this is like Christendom. This is, we've left the pagan behind and we're trying to establish these new things, but yet they kind of, the people, and I guess the church people as well, kept this mermaid. And the legend goes that a sailor went out to sea hundreds and hundreds of years ago and fell in love with the mermaid, kind of promised her the world, but then left, and never came back, sort of broke his promise. And she, sort of filled with rage, followed him all the way from the North Sea, back up the Thames, back up the River Loddon and the River Lyde. And I think on his wedding day, drowned him, sort of pulled him into the river. So it's got quite like a violent ending, and it's like I suppose a warning to I don't know, a warning to kind of, you know, not flirt around, but also perhaps to not explore and maybe to stay in your village and keep where it's safe. So yeah, it's a legend that I discovered like a few years ago. I went to visit the church. Was just like, yeah, really intrigued by it. And obviously in the River Thief we don't have, you know, that kind of level of like romance or vengeance per se, but it was, I think, the route and the kind of landscape of it and the idea of something going up these really specific waterways, was certainly inspired the book. Yeah.
And so did you read a lot of myths and legends yourself when you were younger?
I feel like probably not directly, because I don't really know. I think if I did, it would have been like within fiction, to be honest. You know, like kind of similar to this book. Or I mean, you know, I love like horrible histories. I was always into history. And I feel like when you're into history as a kid, you're going to brush up on like Greek mythology and like Norse stuff. But I don't remember particularly seeking out like the pure myths themselves. I think I've always enjoyed it when they're like fleshed out and there's the kind of, you know, because that's what a myth is as well, isn't it? You know, they change over time, right? And so, yeah, I think, they've always appealed. But I don't think I'm someone who has like researched into the, you know, the kind of original source material or anything like that. But I just think, yeah, they're wonderful.
Well, I have to say, I absolutely loved the character of Adelie. I thought she was just so brave and impetuous and intelligent. She's a very intelligent character. Did she come to you fully formed, or is she based on anyone you know?
Oh, that's a good question, because I think she definitely developed. Like, I think I started off with wanting to have a character who went from a very particular worldview and had that challenge throughout the book.
Yeah.
So that was the kind of basis, was perhaps less so like a person, but more like a person's journey. Mm-hmm. And then I needed to find the character who would like fit into that. And I think with Adelie, like, I think I was always sort of torn. Would she be really dreamy, or would she be very like analytical? I think that was always what I was kind of juggling right at the beginning of the book. And I think once I kind of discovered her voice as someone who was just a bit of an oddball, I was like, that kind of fits both, right? Like, you know, you are perceived as perhaps a bit dreamy and a bit ungrounded from the outside by your peers. But actually it's because maybe there's this like doggedness and just a different way of seeing the world, I guess. Especially at that time, you know, there was the science that we know was kind of in its infancy, I guess. So she certainly would have been seen as someone very odd to sort of be thinking about the status quo and how it maybe doesn't make sense in its totality.
Definitely. I mean, I felt a great deal of sympathy with her and empathy with the expectations, or indeed the lack of expectations.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah,
what she'd really be able to do with her life as a female.
Yeah, totally.
You know, it made me angry as well as a woman reading it. I was like, oh, you know. But did you have to do a lot of research about the role of women in that period? Yeah,
I did a lot of research as to like just typical village life. And I think from that you can kind of deduce like everyone's got a role to play. Everyone's essentially working, and women are working, you know, raising the kids and doing all this domestic stuff. And it's quite hard, because I think with historical research you have so much about like the royalty and the bureaucracy and the politics, but the everyday life of people is, you know, pretty much, we learn about it from like, there's some paintings. I forget who the painter is. I think he's a famous Dutch painter. He painted loads of like, is it bucolic or bubonic? It's bucolic.
Yeah, bucolic, yeah.
Bucolic. Yeah, I guess we're talking about medieval times. So I'm like, the plague. But yeah, bucolic scenes. And so you can kind of see what people are wearing and how they're interacting. But I suppose that is where the imagination comes in, isn't it? Is these things would have been so, just like such a normal part of life, as you say, to not really have any expectation as a woman. But I think the feeling of frustration with that must have been, you know, it's universal, isn't it? The feeling of like, you've got something inside you, you've got a curiosity, and the the world around you doesn't necessarily match that or allow for it, and then how do you internalize that, or do you, you're lucky enough to be able to find something which allows that some space, which I guess, meeting F, this sort of magical creature, allows Adelaide to, expand a bit more.
Well, you definitely get that feeling of her quest being so empowering for her. And the real, it's not just a physical journey, as you already said, it's a journey in what she believes and everything else. So that comes across really, really strongly, definitely.
Oh, great. Yeah.
I absolutely loved the setting, being a Londoner myself,
me too.
there you go. And I also learn a heck of a lot about the tributaries of the Thames, which I didn't know. And I don't mind saying that I went away several times and went, oh, is that right? And went away to do it.
Oh, that's so funny.
So I absolutely loved that. So I'm guessing that needed quite a lot of research. And you've just answered my question, because I was going to ask, are you a fellow London lover? Well, it sounds as though you are.
I am. Yeah, I was born in London. I was born in Whitechapel in the East End, and then moved around a lot as a kid, but have been back here for the last 5 years. And I love it so much. It's the history, the layers of history, and how compact it is. Of course, you can find that in lots of other places in the UK, but I think there's something about London. You can physically see that with the architecture and the fact that everyone's living on top of each other. But yeah, I'm glad you picked up on the tributaries and the river, because I remember for some of my research, I just had to go through Google Maps and just screenshot the river as it goes to London. I'm trying to do this puzzle and match them all up, and then be how long would it take to row from here to here? Because it's funny, you're writing a fantasy, but you also want it to feel really believable. And if some of it's real, you're well, let's try and make it as realistic as possible. But yeah, no, absolutely, it was a real treat to research the London stuff.
Well, it does make it it gives it a realistic feel. If some of it's real, then you believe the rest of it, don't you? That's the way it goes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you have to have the grounding of reality for the fantasy to be plausible.
Without a doubt. I mean, I've always been fascinated by obviously one of my favourite book series is The Rivers of London. Love the Rivers of London series, and until I read those, I didn't realise about all these other rivers that are under London and
it's amazing.
Different places. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and how so much buried history there as well.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And when you start looking into the London, have you been and visited the London Stone?
No, is that part of the wall?
You need to go and see the London Stone. It is the first reputed to be the first stone that was ever laid in London before all the buildings were there, and it's just on the other side of London Bridge. So you do south. Yeah.
I need to check that out. I feel that was a thing that I could really. I'm surprised.
I think you'd find it really interesting. I think
I'd be very inspired to look at that stone. Really awesome.
So, are we allowed to ask what you're working on next?
Ooh. Do you know what? I actually had the book launch for The River Thief last night, and I was asked this question by my editor and my agent. And I was like, I just don't know. I'm so busy because I'm an illustrator as well.
Yeah.
I'm working on a picture book at the moment that's taking up a lot of my time. And I think also a lot of these things I feel and maybe other authors could relate, you don't want to start even dare to think that there might be another one until you know how the first one lands. Right, you're this might be crap. Obviously, it's really nice to have had a lovely reception and to kind of remind myself that no, I am an author, I can do this. So I don't know. I think I'd always love historic fiction, historical fiction. So there's a very good chance that might be in the cards continuing. But also, I've got the Kate on the Case series for younger readers, and that is always such a joy to I think completely let loose and be a bit silly and do something a bit lighter. So I think I would love to do another series for younger readers, but also I feel middle grade is just such a special place as well. So I'm sure I'll be doing a few more bits and pieces, hopefully. Yeah.
Well, I think with Riverfeith. Yes, okay, it's middle grade, but it will go up into secondary very easily.
Yeah, I think so. I think it definitely, it feels like it's the kind of, I'm trying to think like how old would I have been if I was reading a book like this? And I think, anywhere from like 9 to like 13, probably.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. Totally agree. Well, I don't think there is any chance of it being thought crap. So
I really like exposed my insecurities in a very obvious way there.
We've all got them. We've all got them. We're there with you.
Though.
I think you will definitely be writing more. Which makes me very happy. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us about it.
Oh no, it's been like a delight. Thank you for inviting me. Always like a pleasure.
Of course, and I will be looking out eagerly for what comes next.
Eagle-eyed. Okay, I think I've got to impress Bev. What can I write next?
Thank you.